Howdy guys, Jimmy Song here. This is a series of videos talking about Bitcoin and various vices and how they relate and why there's resistance and so on. I mentioned this in the Pride video, but it's worth restating. There's something called greed, right? Like a lot of people tend to think, especially in sort of like capitalist countries, if they're in finance or something like that, they say stuff like, "Oh, greed is good because it gets people to act selfishly, and that in itself will somehow magically end up creating value for civilization." And sometimes it does. To be fair, sometimes it does. If you're a doctor and you happen to be greedy for more money, you might see more patients and work longer hours and so on. If you're a factory worker and you want overtime and you're greedy for that overtime, you might work extra hours and so on. But greed isn't always good. And in fact, I would argue that greed is actually really, really bad oftentimes. And it's what caused the ICO bubble. It's what's caused a lot of other things. The thing that I pointed out in the last video is that oftentimes people jump straight from pride to greed in terms of vices when it comes to Bitcoin. Oftentimes they go from a no-coiner where they're just dismissing everything about Bitcoin and by extension, altcoins and ICOs. And then suddenly they go straight to greed, right? Like where they're issuing their own ICO or buying the latest cheap altcoin that's going to pump or something like that. This is a phenomenon that I've witnessed quite often, and I'm sure you have too, where people just sort of go straight from nothing to what's this random coin that somebody made last week without doing any due diligence whatsoever. Now, there's definitely an element of sloth in there. They don't actually want to investigate a lot of these coins and what they do and how they're structured and where the abuse might be and so on. But there's much more this element of greed where people kind of naturally want to rent seek, right? Like they want to make money for doing almost nothing. And that's kind of, I put that entire category of quote unquote work as rent seeking, right? Like taxing some transaction from one person to another. And what they're kind of hoping to do oftentimes is to like be able to print their own money. I don't know how many people I've met that have almost like it's weird though, because that talk about like making their own ICO or altcoin. It's almost like kind of apologetic, and they're kind of like, oh, I'll just sort of make it as a joke currency and see where it goes. And if it happens to do something great, then I'll get to print my own money. Yay! It's almost like they realize that this is a horribly unfair system if somebody gets to print the money, right? And that's what almost every altcoin and ICO is. It's people getting to print their own money. And that in of itself kind of like they have a guilty conscience about it, which is why I think they sort of frame it in that way and say stuff like, oh, it'll just sort of be a joke, or I just want to learn about how these things work, and if it happens to catch on, then I guess I'll make some money or something like that. I mean, there are a lot more people that are more blatant about it, right? It's just we're hoping to raise this ICO so we can take advantage of a lot of people that are just gonna kind of give money. The thing about altcoins, ICOs, and things like that is that they don't really add any value. These are all zero-sum games, and a lot of people are almost willfully blind to that fact, and because of the potential profit, or really they're just kind of blinded by greed. And that's kind of what happens in the as people learn about Bitcoin and money and like control, and these are all issues that have existed throughout time, right? Like monetary debasement is a way that at least historically sovereigns have gotten money out of the populace without really them knowing about it, right? Diocletian like degraded silver denarii, right? Like it's like 60% silver and then all the way down to 2, something like that. And that was a way in which he could get precious metals without taxing the population explicitly. And that was traditionally a way that I would categorize as greed. That's that happens when you combine greed and money, and like the basics of money, and that power is kind of available to a lot more people now because you can create your own token. And the thing about those tokens is that oftentimes like they can issue more tokens like just out of thin air, right? That's essentially printing your own money, and that temptation will always kind of be there because they're centralized, and that's part. They want access to that, right? They want to be able to tap that extra money, and that's why a lot of people sort of jump from no coining straight to cheap coins or creating their own coin or whatever. Anyway, that about covers it for Bitcoin and Vice Part 2, greed. There's more coming, and I'll talk about the other ones too. All right. Anyway, hope that helps you. This song is done.